My sister wore my dress and declared, "It looks better on me." My husband agreed. They both laughed, not knowing that in just 1 week, they would be on their knees begging for forgiveness. It all started when Tiffany, my younger sister, called me crying, asking to stay temporarily. I was kind enough to take her in, but soon after, she started stealing my life. From wearing my clothes without permission, destroying my important work, to cooking my husband's favorite dish just to humiliate me. But the worst part? She turned my husband into her puppet, making him turn against me every single day. Until I found an old webcam and decided to strike back with the most perfect revenge plan. It all started 2 weeks ago. A late-night call from my younger sister, Tiffany, jolted me awake. Sobbing, she recounted a terrible fight with our parents and how she had stormed out of the house. "Eleanor, can I stay with you? Just for a couple of weeks, until things cool down. I have nowhere else to go." Her voice trembled, and my kind heart, as usual, couldn't resist. I glanced at my husband, Mark, who simply nodded understandingly. Of course, we couldn't leave her on the streets. That very evening, Tiffany stood on our doorstep with a small suitcase, looking like a frightened, drenched sparrow. She hugged me tightly, whispering words of gratitude. In the first few days, she was an absolute angel, quiet, helpful, constantly trying to assist with cleaning and praising my cooking. "I owe you so much," she would say in the evenings. "You're my only real family." I was genuinely happy to help my little sister. Mark and my home had always been our quiet haven, full of comfort and warmth. Little did I know that I was letting a pirate ship into this haven, ready to board and seize my life. This idyll lasted exactly a week, and then subtle changes began to appear. First, Tiffany started forgetting to clean up after herself. Then she began taking my clothes without asking. I chalked it up to sisterly familiarity, not wanting to start a conflict. The breaking point came on Mark and my 5th anniversary. I was rushing home, looking forward to a romantic evening, but I found my sister in the living room, preening in front of the mirror in my new silk dress, which I had been saving for this very occasion. "Tiffany," I gasped. She turned around, and there wasn't a trace of embarrassment on her face. "Don't be mad, sis. It looks better on me, doesn't it, Mark?" My husband, sitting on the couch, nodded. "Yeah, looks great on you." I felt as though I had been doused with cold water, but I didn't make a scene. Silently turning around, I went to the bedroom, feeling everything inside boiling with resentment. To distract myself, I began aimlessly sorting through things in the closet and stumbled upon an old box. Inside, among the wires, lay a long-forgotten webcam. I picked it up. The small, cold lens stared right at me. At that moment, a vague but persistent thought took root in my mind. I quickly hid the camera in a drawer under a stack of towels. After the dress incident, I threw myself into work, trying to avoid my sister and husband as much as possible. I had an urgent project, a plan for a country house for an important client, and I spent the whole night hunched over the blueprints. By morning, tired but satisfied, I left the main sheet with the facade on the dining table to let the ink dry completely and went to get some coffee. At that moment, Tiffany fluttered into the kitchen, humming a tune. In her hand was a glass of cranberry juice. Passing by the table, she swung her hand unnaturally, and the glass flew right onto my work. The dark red liquid spread across the paper, turning the delicate lines into an ugly, blurred stain. "Oops," she shrieked. "Sorry, Eleanor, I didn't mean to. I'm so clumsy." Her apologies sounded like mockery. Mark came into the kitchen because of the noise. He saw the ruined drawing, me with a stony face, and Tiffany looking ready to burst into tears. "Why are you standing there?" he said to me reproachfully. "Can't you see she's upset? It happens to everyone. It's your fault for leaving important papers on the kitchen table." He hugged Tiffany and led her into the living room, soothing her along the way. I was left alone in front of my destroyed work. Rage and resentment choked me, but I didn't let myself break down. Taking scissors, I carefully examined the sheet. The main drawing was hopelessly ruined, but the part with the foundation plan was almost undamaged. I carefully cut out the intact foundation. I wouldn't have to do everything from scratch. All day, I redid the damaged part of the project. Anger gave way to cold concentration. By evening, I had finished everything and took the work to the client, who was very pleased with the project. I was returning home, utterly exhausted, but with the feeling that I hadn't allowed myself to be broken. I dreamed of a hot shower and a simple dinner. However, opening the door, I immediately realized that I could forget about peace. A divine, spicy aroma wafted from the kitchen. I entered and saw Tiffany, wearing my apron, taking a large casserole dish off the stove. "There you are," she beamed. I decided to make up for this morning's misunderstanding and prepared a surprise. "Your favorite shepherd's pie, Mark," she sang as my husband entered behind me. Mark looked into the casserole dish, and his face broke into a smile. It was the shepherd's pie I had been unsuccessfully trying to cook for him for years. "Unbelievable," he exclaimed after tasting a spoonful. "Tiffany, this is simply a masterpiece. Tastes just like my mom used to make." "Eleanor," he turned to me with his mouth full. "Honestly, learn from your sister. You've never quite managed to get it right." He laughed at his carefree joke. Tiffany modestly lowered her eyes, enjoying her triumph. And I looked at them and understood that this wasn't just dinner, it was a public execution. They clearly demonstrated that I was a bad housewife and a useless wife compared to my talented, caring sister. After dinner, I felt crushed. He didn't just praise my sister, he publicly humiliated me, devaluing all my efforts over the years of our marriage. Tiffany enjoyed her power, and I became a shadow in my own home. The next morning didn't bring any relief. I mechanically got ready for work, trying to find the strength to simply walk out the door. In the bathroom, I reached for my expensive French face cream, which I used very sparingly. The bottle felt suspiciously light. I unscrewed the lid. It was almost empty. A cold wave of anger washed over me. This was the last straw. I went into the living room, where Tiffany was flipping through a magazine. "Did you use my cream?" I asked without preamble. She looked at me with surprised eyes, full of offended innocence. What are you talking about?" "Of course not. How could you think that?" "I never take other people's things. You've become so suspicious and mean lately." She said this with such indignation in her voice that for a second I felt guilty myself. But I knew the truth. Arguing was useless. That same day, during my lunch break, I went to the store and bought a new bottle of cream and the same foundation. Returning home in the evening, I left the almost empty jars in plain sight in the bathroom and wrapped the new, full ones in a scarf and hid them on the farthest shelf in the closet. It was my little secret, my first step towards defense. I wouldn't let her use my things and my life with impunity anymore. My little victory with the cosmetics gave me only a temporary respite. Tiffany changed tactics. She stopped attacking openly and began to act through Mark. She became his main advisor, whispering in his ear what a worthless housewife I was, and he absorbed her poison like a sponge. "Eleanor, why do we have chicken again for dinner?" he would ask in the evening, poking at his plate disdainfully. "I read that you need to eat more red meat." I knew he hadn't read anything. It was a phrase I had heard from Tiffany the day before. "You forgot to water the plants again," he would say the next day. Tiffany noticed that they were completely wilted. His nitpicking became daily. I hadn't ironed his shirt right. I had bought the wrong bread. I was talking too loudly on the phone. He criticized everything, and in every word I heard the echo of my sister's voice. She successfully turned my husband into her weapon, directed against me. Any attempts to justify myself or object ended in a scandal. "I'm just giving you advice and you immediately start yelling," he would fume. "You can't take criticism at all." I realized that I was losing him completely. He was no longer my ally, my close person. He became her puppet. In despair, I decided that I had to pull him out from under her influence, remind him of us. And I had a plan. I would arrange an ideal romantic evening for us, like in the good old days. An evening just for the two of us. I chose a day when Tiffany was planning to go to the movies with friends. To make everything perfect, I asked to leave work early. I bought a bottle of the same wine we drank on our honeymoon, candles, fresh steaks. I wanted to recreate the atmosphere of our first date. As I set the table, my heart fluttered with hope. I believed that if I could reach him, remind him of our love, he would wake up from this delusion. Around 7 p.m., everything was ready. The soft candlelight was reflected in the glasses, and the aroma of grilled meat wafted from the kitchen. At that moment, the doorbell rang. I flew to open it, thinking it was Mark. But a crowd of noisy young people I didn't know stood on the threshold. Behind them, as if nothing were wrong, Tiffany peeked out. "Oh, hi. We changed our minds about going to the movies and decided to hang out here," she beamed. "I forgot to warn you. You don't mind, do you?" At that moment, Mark arrived. He saw this crowd, the table set for two, me standing with a petrified face, and simply waved his hand. "Oh, well, since you're here, come on in," he said and stepped into the apartment, pulling the young people along. Our romantic evening was ruined. I hid in the bedroom, unable to watch the circus. To at least occupy my hands, I decided to clean up Tiffany's scattered things. Looking under her bed for a rolling mug, I froze. There, in the dust, lay the remains of my grandmother's music box. I looked at these fragments, and the noise of the party in the living room seemed to fade into the background. It wasn't just a broken thing. It was a trampled memory, a desecration of the most precious and only thing I had left of my grandmother. Cold, ringing rage drove all the pain and resentment out of my soul. I carefully collected the pieces of carved wood and the broken figurine of the ballerina. With these in my hands, I left the room. I walked through the entire living room, ignoring the surprised looks of the guests. I went straight to the couch, where Mark and Tiffany were sitting, laughing. The music died down. I silently held out to them on my palm what remained of the music box. "What's this?" My voice sounded quiet and terrible, so even Tiffany was momentarily confused. But only for a moment. Her eyes immediately filled with tears, and she threw herself at Mark. "Mark, she's threatening me." She broke it herself. She burst into my room and said she hates me and would kick me out of the house. And then she broke the music box to accuse me. I waited. I gave him one last chance, a chance to believe me, not her. But Mark looked at me with a gaze full of anger and scolded me for making a scene in front of the guests. "Eleanor, stop it," he hissed. "You're crazy with jealousy. Go to your room and don't embarrass yourself. Do you see what you've done to your sister?" He hugged the sobbing Tiffany. And at that moment, under the gazes of strangers in my own home, I realized that my marriage was over. My husband had made his choice. I didn't stay for their celebration. I went to the bedroom and locked the door. I didn't cry anymore. The tears had dried up, leaving behind only a ringing emptiness and absolute clarity. Marriage, love, trust, all of it was destroyed, like my grandmother's relics. Late at night, when the guests had left, I made one last attempt to talk to Mark. He entered the bedroom and I calmly asked, "Why didn't you even try to listen to me?" He rubbed his face wearily. "What's there to listen to? Your hysterics. Eleanor, you're not yourself. You need to rest, take some sedatives. You're exhausting yourself and everyone around you." That was the end. The next day, in complete despair, I called Mom, hoping for a drop of sympathy. Stuttering, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice, I told her everything, about the dress, about the money, about the broken music box. Mom was silent for a long time, and then sighed and said the words that finished me off. "Honey, Tiffany is younger. Be wiser. She cried so much on the phone yesterday, saying that you don't love her at all and constantly provoke her. Please try to be gentler with her. You can't treat your own sister like that." I hung up the phone. The circle was closed. Everyone had betrayed me. I was cornered, and now I had no choice but to fight for myself alone. Realizing that there was no help to be had from anywhere, I fell silent. I walked around the house like a shadow, mechanically performing my duties, but my thoughts were far away. My submission and silence were perceived by Tiffany and Mark as a complete, final capitulation. Feeling absolute impunity, my sister decided to consolidate her power. The next day, she started rearranging the living room, in the center of our apartment. That shelving unit of yours is horribly old-fashioned and clutters up the whole space, she declared, casually dumping my books and photos on the floor. We'll put the couch here. It'll be much more modern. Tiffany, don't touch my things, I said in a lifeless voice. Oh, why are you starting? I'm doing it for everyone, she pouted immediately. Mark entered the room and supported her from the doorway. I like the idea. It's been a long time coming to refresh something. Great taste, Tiffany. Let me help. And the two of them, chatting cheerfully, began to destroy my cozy world before my eyes, rearranging the furniture that had witnessed Mark and I entire life. I looked at them, and there was no more pain or resentment in me, just coldness. And it was this coldness that gave birth to a plan in my head. Enough of being a victim. I remembered the webcam hidden in the dresser. The plan was born instantly, clearly, and mercilessly. That night, waiting until everyone was asleep, I tiptoed to retrieve my weapon. Silently, like a ghost, I installed the camera on the bottom shelf, camouflaging it among the souvenirs. The little lens stared stubbornly at the couch. Now all that remained was to wait. The next morning, I was a completely different person. I left the room with a quiet, guilty smile, made breakfast for everyone, obediently listened to another portion of criticism from Mark about the wrong coffee, and even agreed with Tiffany that the curtains in the living room really should be replaced. My sudden obedience disarmed them. They watched me from above, with the satisfied look of victors, confident that they had finally broken me. In the afternoon, I timed it so that when they were both sitting in the living room, I approached them. I want to apologize, I said, humbly lowering my eyes. I've been thinking a lot and realized that I've been behaving terribly. My jealousy and anger ruined everything. Forgive me, Tiffany, and you, Mark. I've been a bad sister and wife. They exchanged glances, and their faces reflected pure smugness. To make up for my guilt, I want to host a big family dinner this Sunday. We'll invite our parents. I want to apologize to Tiffany in front of everyone so that our family can live in peace again. It was exactly what they wanted, my public humiliation. Finally, you've come to your senses, Mark said condescendingly. Of course, sis, I forgive you, Tiffany sang magnanimously. The trap had snapped shut. For the next few days, I was an exemplary hostess. I did everything they wanted. And at night, when the house fell asleep, I turned on my laptop. The camera was working perfectly. I watched my sister, who, thinking that no one was watching, grimaced, imitating me, rummaged through our things. I copied the files into a secret folder. My arsenal for revenge grew with each passing hour. Sunday arrived. By 5 p.m., my parents arrived, worried but pleased with the upcoming reconciliation. I set the table, preparing my mom and dad's favorite dishes. Tiffany fluttered around the apartment, portraying a generous, forgiving sister. Mark sat at the head of the table with the important air of a wise head of the family who had managed to set his erring wife on the right path. The atmosphere was saturated with falseness, but no one but me seemed to notice. We sat down at the table. Dad made a toast to family and understanding. Mom squeezed my hand, whispering, "You're doing such a great job, honey, for deciding to take this step. I'm proud of you." Each of their words was like a sting to me, but I just smiled meekly in response. All evening, Tiffany talked about how much she loved us all and how important it was to forgive offenses, casting meaningful glances at me. When the main course was finished, I rose from my seat. All eyes turned to me. It was time for my public penance. My dears, I'm so glad we've all gathered here today, I began in an even, calm voice. I really want peace and truth to reign in our house. And before I say the words you're all waiting for, I'd like to show you a short film. It's about our life. I think it will help everyone understand the situation better. I took out the laptop and connected it to the large television in the living room. Mark and Tiffany exchanged puzzled glances. There was only slight curiosity on their faces. I pressed play. On the big screen, an image of our living room appeared, filmed from an angle on the bookshelf. For the first few seconds, everyone was simply bewildered, and then the movie began. Here's Tiffany, thinking she's alone, disgustedly mocking my walk. Here she takes my new blouse out of the closet and accidentally snags it on a nail, making a pull. Here she rummages through Mark's desk drawers and then whispers in his ear what a mess I've made of his documents. With each new scene, the smile slipped from the faces of my loved ones. Mom and Dad looked at the screen with open mouths. Mark paled before my eyes. Tiffany's face went from smug to bewildered and then panicked. What is this? Turn it off, she screamed. But I didn't turn it off. I had saved the best for last. The last scene appeared on the screen. Tiffany sits on the couch alone, painting her nails with my polish, and sings aloud with a scornful smirk. One more week, and that sap Mark will be completely mine. And Sis will fly back to her mommy and daddy. The apartment will be ours. The phrase hung in deafening silence. All eyes, full of horror, shame, and anger, were riveted on Tiffany, who sat whiter than chalk, unable to utter a word. The silence in the room was so thick that it seemed you could cut it with a knife. The first to break it was Dad. He slowly rose from his seat, and I had never seen such an expression on his face, a mixture of icy rage and deep, bitter shame. He looked at his younger daughter, Tiffany. His voice sounded quiet, but there was metal in it. Pack your things immediately so that in 15 minutes, your spirit is not in this house. Daddy, it's not what you think, Tiffany squealed, bursting into real panic-stricken sobs. It's a joke, it's a montage. Eleanor set it all up. She's a programmer, she can do it. She tricked us all. But her pathetic whimpering could no longer convince anyone. Mom, covering her face with her hands, cried silently from shame. We raised a monster, she whispered through her tears. Eleanor, honey, forgive us. Please forgive us for being so blind and deaf to you. Mark sat like a stone statue. His face was as white as a sheet, and his eyes were frozen with horror. Horror at the realization of what an idiot he had been, how easily he had been manipulated, how he had betrayed and trampled the only person who truly loved him. He slowly turned his head towards me. His lips moved, but he couldn't make a sound. There was everything in his gaze: supplication, despair, fear, and simply an abyss of guilt. I looked at them all, and for the first time in weeks felt not pain, but peace. I didn't gloat. I simply watched as the truth, released, meted out its own justice. Tiffany, realizing that no one would believe her, jumped up and ran with a wail to her room to pack her things. Justice had come. A few minutes later, Tiffany flew out of the room. In one hand, she had a hastily packed suitcase, and in the other, a crumpled jacket. Her face was distorted by anger and hatred. She cast a venomous glance at me, hissing, "Bitch, may you rot in this apartment." Dad, standing at the door, grabbed her by the elbow and literally pushed her onto the landing. "I don't want to see you again. You're not my daughter." We heard his muffled voice full of pain. The door slammed shut, forever cutting her off from our life. When the footsteps on the stairs subsided, Mark finally found his voice. He slowly slid off the couch onto his knees and, reaching out to me, burst into tears. These were not quiet tears, but loud, ugly male sobs, full of despair and self-loathing. Eleanor, forgive me. Forgive me if you can." He crawled towards me on his knees, trying to touch my feet. I was such a blind idiot, such a smug ass. I don't know what came over me. She just entangled me with her lies, and I was happy to be deceived by her. I ruined everything, our love, our trust, our everything. I'm ready to do anything to fix it. I beg you, just don't kick me out. I'll do whatever you say. I looked down at him, at this crying, broken man, whom I had called my husband only yesterday. I felt neither anger nor pity, only weariness and the firmness I had gained in this struggle. I took a step back, not allowing him to touch me. "Get up, Mark. Don't humiliate yourself anymore. It's not just about Tiffany, it's about you. She just showed what you're really worth, how easily you're willing to betray and trample a loved one for your own comfort and flattery. You say you can fix everything, but how will you fix this?" I nodded to the fragments of my grandmother's music box, which still lay on the table. Trust, like this music box, is broken. You can't glue it back together so that the cracks aren't visible. Mom and Dad, who had been silently watching the scene, came up to me. Honey, we'll support any decision you make, Mom said quietly. I looked at Mark, who was still kneeling in the middle of the room. I need time, I said firmly. I need a lot of time to understand if I want to see you in my life. In the meantime, live with your parents. He understood that it wasn't a request, it was a decision, my decision. What would you have done in Eleanor's place? Write in the comments below, as it's very important for me to know your opinion. Thank you so much for listening to this story. See you in the next video.